see, I think I can drop my chair a little bit. There we go, we're probably good now. The second cup of coffee is just like never as good as the first for some reason. Howdy folks, I'm coming at you with another TBR Shelf video. Only 2 of the books that I'm going to go over today were actually on my physical TBR shelf from my library, but I'm using these videos kind of as a joint wrap-up of what I've read over X period of time, just to talk about books and have fun talking about what I'm reading and share all of our book journeys together. So I have a collection of books from about a week and a half at this point. It's been a very interesting week for me. I had some travel for work last week and ended up having just like a horrendous experience. I was going to Chicago, which is only a handful of hours from me. But I was gonna fly because it was a business trip. Like I didn't want to drive and take a car and worry about that. So I was like, I'm just gonna fly. I'm gonna go to my local airport. I'm gonna hop on a plane, take like an hour flight to the Windy City. No big deal. I'll have no issues. I thought I would have a lot of reading time while I was sitting in the airport, like on the airplane, sort of that jazz, right? Well, it ended up that I had a ton of downtime, but it was the most miserable experience because the week that I went, we had a ton of really severe thunderstorms pop up and tornadoes as well. If you live anywhere in the Midwest, you're very familiar with tornadoes and the havoc they cause, as well as just like when there's wind in a thunderstorm, it gets really bad. I was leaving on a Monday, got to the airport. My flight was at like 1 o'clock. And so, no, I showed up to the airport around 1 o'clock. My flight was at like 3 that afternoon. Didn't have any reason to show up that early because this was a tiny little airport. I got through security in all of 5 minutes. But I don't ever do pre-check for TSA. So I very much am a stickler for I show up within like the 2 hours to 90-minute window before I have to be on the plane for my flight. So I show up, okay, no problem. I'm sitting there and the plane gets in that's gonna take us on the return trip. They get everybody off that plane and then there's a delay because there's some sort of issue with the plane that they can't take off because the plane is broken. They're describing it as a cosmetic concern, but like airport rules and regulations, they have to get everything locked down before they can actually get passengers on the plane. Within this, like, I don't know if it was even a 20-minute delay, it was very short, but within that time frame, they get contacted from O'Hare that our flight's been grounded because of the weather that's coming in. O'Hare is limiting who's allowed to go in and out of the airport, and of course, we're a tiny little flight, so we're not top priority. We are first on the chopping block. So we get delayed about 4 hours at this point. So now my flight's not taking off till basically dinner time, 4 or 5 o'clock my time. I'm like, okay, no big deal. Like, it means I'll miss the event of the night for my work trip, but whatever, I'll still get in. But then we get another call. You've been pushed back another 2 hours. I'm like, this is great. I don't want to sit in the airport this time. Get a hold of my partner. I'm like, hey, come pick me up. We'll go to dinner. I'll come back. I'll have plenty of time to do all of that and get back in time for my flight. He comes and picks me up. We go to dinner. While I'm at dinner, I get a text saying, oh, your flight's been canceled now. We've rebooked you on, I think it was like a 6:30 a.m. flight the next morning. Super frustrated at this point in time. I'm like, I had heavily considered as I was getting all of these delays, just looking for a flight from the international airport we have here. It's an hour away. I really didn't want to make the drive, but I was like, I have to get into Chicago tonight. So I'm sitting at dinner being like, frantically looking up flights from that airport. There's nothing going out tonight. I'm gonna be late. I have to get to this trip tonight in Chicago. End up being able to find the last bus out of town and take a 2-hour bus ride to Chicago. That was an interesting experience. I don't want to repeat it ever. It was rough. And it was not, as a single woman traveling alone, is not an experience that I want to repeat. I made it safely. Everything's fine. We all good. Got it to Chicago. While in Chicago, this is the first book that I read. It is called The Lost Summers of Newport. It is written by 3 authors and has 3 POVs from each author. And we're following a family that interacts with this mansion at Newport Beach. Our oldest timeline is in the Gilded Age of America, and we have this newly rich family that has bought this mansion in an effort to like establish themselves in the upper echelons of society at that time and kind of like prove their worth and prove their status to their friends, despite the fact that they clearly don't fit in, and they kind of shortcut a lot of the class etiquette, if you will, and they don't, a lot of stuff is just like a facade. They don't actually put money and effort into becoming part of the elite class of their day. We are following Ellen in that time frame. She is from a family of Irish immigrants. She's running away from something in her past and has become a music teacher for Mabel, who is this heiress and whose family has bought this mansion at Newport. And they are looking forward to hosting an Italian prince who they're trying to get him to marry Mabel, so that like they can again move up the ladder, the social ladder, if you will. Our second perspective is from a woman named Lucky. She is Mabel's granddaughter, and so we're kind of in like the Roaring 20s period of time. Lots of very glitzy, glamorous parties. She's in a marriage that she had to get into because they slept together and she got pregnant immediately. And they are now in a very rocky period of their marriage. He cheats on her a lot. She's trying to decide like if she wants to stay in this, what does she want to do, because her daughter is her world. She doesn't want to ruin her daughter's life, but she's extremely unhappy and trying to find purpose and meaning and fulfillment in her life because she simply can't stay here anymore. And then our present day, it's not quite present day, but it's like 2017 or something like that, is Andy. She is a historical preservationist. So like she goes to old houses to restore them to whatever like time period they were in and tries to like maintain them in mansions. Is a huge interest of hers. She has ended up on this TV show called like McMansion Renovations or something like that. I don't remember the exact name, but the premise of it is that she goes to these old mansions and she'll do like a room makeover or some like small portion of the house. They are pushing her more and more to make it this weird marriage of Real Housewives and the Kardashians and basically delve into the deep dark secrets of these families' pasts and be super scandalous. She doesn't want to do that because her passion is the history of the homes and she wants to be able to tell the family's story through the houses and let the house kind of like speak for itself. So she is at this Newport mansion and basically like is meeting the few family members who still live. I think we're at the point where it's Lucky's grandkids at this point that she's interacting with. She's kind of uncovering the secrets of this family and this home while they're filming for her show. I thought this book was really fun. I liked the different characters' perspectives. I never once felt like we were getting like a completely different writing style. I think it was smart that they wrote 3 different timelines and character perspectives because there was like some nuance in how each character spoke in their head, and we're dealing with different time periods, and so that also like creates this level of separation between the characters where it feels very natural that we're speaking in different voices and we're living in different time periods. But I never felt that as like a very different author's voice, if that makes sense. But the story was super fun. It definitely had some sad moments, and the plot itself, like, I felt like I was always 2 steps ahead of everybody in the book, which I don't think is a bad thing. Like, I don't think this book was meant to be a mystery in the sense that you're waiting till the last page to find out what happens. I think there's an intention for you to be able to put the pieces together, particularly because you're the one who is traversing the timelines, right? And everybody else is only in their own timeline trying to figure out and put the pieces together based off of conversations or lack of conversations. So I would recommend this. I think I gave it like a 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. And then back to my travel saga. I was flying back on a Thursday, got to the O'Hare airport for a 12 o'clock flight. Surprisingly, had 0 issues getting through security, got to my gate, and I kid you not, about 20 minutes after being at my gate, get a notification that my flight has been canceled. Not delayed, but has just been canceled because they also expected thunderstorms to be coming in, and my flight just wasn't priority. They say they're going to rebook me on a flight that will leave 10:30 Central, which is hours and hours and hours away. Like, I'd be sitting at this airport forever trying to leave. So I quickly work with the airline attendants to be like, hey, can you get me on any direct flights to the main airport? I don't care at this point about an hour drive home. I'd rather fly and have a long drive versus sitting in O'Hare for 10 hours. Unfortunately, the very next flight was already booked, and so they put me on a 2 o'clock flight. And I was like, that's fine. It's 3 hours away, but 3 hours, I'll take it. I get over to that gate, and there's a flight to Salt Lake City that is boarding. They get those people on the plane, and all of a sudden, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes later, they're all coming off the plane, and we get a notification that there's some sort of mechanical issue in the cockpit, like the pilot's chair or something isn't adjusting or whatever. TLDR, plane is broken. They have to get everybody off the plane. They're trying to figure out what to do. We get a notification our flight has now been pushed back. I think it was like 3.5 hours. And then it was 4 hours. And then it was like 4.5 hours. Okay? So if you do the math, I'm sitting at a boarding time of like 6:30 at this point. Between like 6:30, 6:45 is when we're supposed to board and leave the airport. I'm like, this sucks. Because, you know, I was trying to avoid leaving super late. But I called my partner. I was like, it's fine. It switches up plans, but I don't want to inconvenience you and like make you drive all the way up here to pick me up. So I'll just stay and wait for my flight. I'll read, whatever. As my luck has it, they keep delaying the Salt Lake City flight, end up getting everybody on a plane and taken off right before all of the thunderstorms hit. And it's not just raining, mind you. It's like, it is a very intense lightning storm. There are very high winds. We're starting to get not just tornado watches, but tornado warnings. My flight does come in on time. They get us all boarded. We pull out and then we sit there and they tell us we can't take off. They're not allowing anybody to take off or land at this point in time. We're gonna have to wait and see if there's a break in the weather that we can leave. I started a movie on this plane, a 2-hour-long movie. I almost finished that movie without us leaving the tarmac. I think I maybe had 15 minutes left in that film when they finally were like, okay, there may be an opening, but we have to go back to the gate and refuel. Duh. I knew this was gonna happen, okay? And I knew it. This is the point where I finally acknowledged to myself, well, we're going back to the gate, which means I am not leaving this airport tonight on a plane. Like, that's just not gonna happen. So we get back to the gate, they get us all off. I kid you not. As soon as we all get off the plane, we get a notification, your flight's been delayed. You're now leaving at like 9 p.m. at the earliest. Stupid. I knew at this point though, thankfully, that if I had waited and taken the original flight that they had rebooked me on, it would have already been canceled. So like, I would have been in this situation regardless, where I was waiting for hours and hours and hours and hours to get on the plane. At this point, I call my partner and tell him it's not looking good. I guess I have 3 options. Rebook a flight for tomorrow, I get a car and drive home, or you come pick me up, because it was too late at this point to do any buses back to any airport or back to my hometown. So I look at flights for the next day, and I think the earliest was at like 4 p.m. the next day, which was just, I did not want to spend another day traveling. I wanted to be home so badly, and it was just super late, and I felt so bad because I didn't want to drive. I didn't want to make my partner drive, and I felt so bad because I was like, he had suggested doing it earlier in the day, and I had said no. Now we were sitting here at him not even being able to get to the airport until midnight, and then us turning around for like a 3-hour drive home, which we are both not night owls. We were going to be exhausted. It was going to be miserable. I was already miserable. He was kind of already miserable because he wasn't going to sleep until I was home and had to figure out what was happening. Like, not to boohoo myself because everybody at the airport was in this situation. I had a couple coworkers who also got caught in all of the storms and ended up like getting on flights that didn't get them home until 4 a.m., 5 a.m. I don't want to like host a pity party for myself. Everybody in airports across the Midwest was experiencing this. Weather was awful. I think afterward I learned that there were, I don't know, 3 or 4 tornadoes that did touch down in the area. So it was no joke that the weather was awful. My partner did end up making the drive. He got to O'Hare at about like 12:30 a.m. Central, turned right around, drove home, pulled into our house a little after 4 a.m. our time. I think I grabbed my suitcase and my bag and brought them in, dropped them on the floor, and we both just like fell in bed and crashed, and I slept for 3 hours. But I'm home, safely, soundly, finally, like, I don't know, a week later, almost a week later, I feel fully recovered from my travel. And all of that being said, while I was at the airport, I did read a little bit of a nonfiction book that I'm doing from my TBR shelf, but I didn't finish it. So what I did instead is I listened to 2 different audiobooks. One was a psychological thriller called The Imposter. I'm not going to say much about it because it was just, I was in a mood where I didn't want to physically read, but I wanted to like continue my reading while I was just sitting there. I didn't want to just like doom scroll YouTube or something. And so I turned it on, I listened to it. It was blah. I gave it 2 stars. It felt like one of those books where an author wrote a short story and people really liked it, and so she turned it into a series, and the series isn't super great, the writing isn't super great, none of the characters were enjoyable people. I was done with it. And then the second one I read was a Veronica Roth fantasy novel. It is an adult series of hers. I think it's just a duology at this point in time, but it was called When Among Crows. Very fascinating. It was funny because it's set in Chicago, which is, you know, where I was trying to leave from. So it was fun because like I actually had some pictures in my head of places she was talking about. Not exact places, but like it wasn't just a generic cityscape that I was picturing. I had actually been to this quote-unquote underground or like the lower city of Chicago, and so I could like see that in my head when she was describing basically where these magical creatures operate within Chicago. The magic system was very fascinating. A lot of it pulled from Polish and Russian and Eastern European folklore, which I always find the representation of different magic systems from like our very Western Grimm's fairy tale-esque or like Lord of the Rings-esque magic systems super interesting. I love to read about it. The story itself, I find with audiobooks, I sometimes struggle to like get as involved as I do with a physical book. So if I read it again, which I might, just to finish the series, I think I'll read it in physical form and enjoy it a lot more. But even on audiobook, like, we were following a group of 3 characters who were on this adventure to like solve this curse that was impacting one of the species of magical creatures. It was a group of people who like aren't supposed to be friends in real life but end up becoming friends. There's like a bit of a romance between 2 of them, which is really cute. Yeah, and it was just like, it was a quick read. I think the book itself was probably really short because the audiobook was only about 4.5 hours, but it was enjoyable to be able to listen to that. It was like a very dark fantasy, but weirdly soothing at the same time. And maybe that was just the narration, but like it was just a very calming fantasy to read, if that makes sense. There's some good action scenes, some good like character moments, interesting plot. I think I gave that one 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads, and The Imposter I give 2 out of 5 stars. Then we're back home, and the next 2 books, which I'll talk about now, is The Crossing Places. This is the first in a 15-book series. I somehow end up in this situation where I'm constantly picking up a book, thinking it's a one-off, and then it ends up being part of a series. Thankfully, this one actually ended up being book 1, so it wasn't me stepping into a series halfway through that I had no context for. Super cute British mystery novel. We have our forensic anthropologist Ruth and the police detective Harry Nelson. They are trying to figure out a couple cases of missing girls, so very serious subject matter, very sad story, and the relationships are very complicated. Like, it's weird because it's like people are happy with their jobs, but they're not happy with their love lives and their relationships, like in terms of friendship and just the connection that they have with others. There's some interesting discussions of loneliness and what it means to be alone. The landscape plays super heavily into the book in terms of the actual plot and the mystery and murders that they're trying to figure out, but also insight into each character and like how they respond to the landscape says a lot about them. So I just thought that was really interesting. I liked the dynamics between our characters. I always love books that have people who are really good at their job and like to talk about their job, and that's shown in the book. And like we get to learn little glimpses of what archaeologists do and how they're trained to do their job and what they look for. And I'd always just find that really fun. I watched the show Bones a couple summers ago. It got really repetitive by the end seasons, but I like that dynamic of like academic scientific person with your kind of down-to-earth policeman, if that makes sense. I know it's a trope, but I find it a more enjoyable trope than some others. At this point, I'm not intending to pick up the rest of the series. I was reading through like the titles and some of the synopses of the book and have a general idea of where it goes. I'm interested enough. I liked the style of it. I like cozy British mysteries, so I think at some point I might pick some of them up as I go. They're definitely good books for like when you're in a reading slump or when you're trying to break up some like larger books. This would definitely be a go-to for me. So Crossing Places got, I think, a 4 out of 5 stars. Last but not least, we have a book from my free little library book haul that I did a couple weeks ago, and I think that video should already be out before this one. But this is Think Twice. It is a plot that centers on being identical twins and what happens when people decide to impersonate each other and can get away with it because they look the exact same. Again, it is like a very late book in a series. It's interesting because I think the series focuses on a different character who features in here. And so Benny and Alice, who are our twins here, I think are side characters on some of those others, but this is the first one where they're our main duo. So I don't think you're missing any context by reading this separate from the series. What I will say though is it was odd because we were getting chapters from Mary's perspective, who is the MC from the other books, and I did think that was weird. I was like, this to me read as kind of a standalone book, and so I didn't understand why we were getting into Mary's perspective because she wasn't our focus necessarily. Like, it wasn't, I don't think it was valuable to the book to have her perspective. It does break up Alice and Benny's perspective and kind of gives you this, you know, third party, how are the people reacting to, how are the people responding, or like why are they being duped into thinking that you know, these identical twins have successfully swapped places, what are the ways that the people around them kind of like just accept it and move on, or what are the clues that key them into, oh, you might not be who you say you are. I can give some grace to Mary's perspective for that being the tack it took, but there was still a lot of, like, to me, unnecessary stuff around her family and her relationship and her love life and what was happening with her that I just felt was unnecessary to this book. I think overall the plot felt a little contrived. It's a little unrealistic to me, and I am someone who is an identical twin. And so I grew up with, nobody could tell my sister and I apart, but as adults, we look absolutely nothing alike. We obviously have like very similar mannerisms because we were raised in the same household, but I just think that physically we don't look the same right now. I don't think we share a lot of the same beliefs. We have very different life trajectories at the moment. And so it's hard for me to think that people would ever be able to confuse us even if we did look the same. I have known a lot of adult identical twins in my life, and there's always something. Speech patterns can be different. I think there's always this element of once you're adults, you do things that are different physically, so you look different. So like one group of female identical twins I knew, one of them was always like more fashionable, if you will, than the other, and always like did her hair and wore a lot more makeup and like styled herself more, which I know is a lot of superficial stuff that you could probably strip all that back and make them look similar again. I don't know, I just like, it's weird to me. It feels very contrived and unrealistic that you could have two people who physically look the same and you could have an interaction with them, like a long-running interaction with them over multiple days, and still think that they're this other person that you've known longer. Like, I don't know that you can just step into somebody else's life and be able to successfully pass it off when up to this point these identical twins have led extremely different lifestyles. They grew up in separate households because they were separated at birth. Like, they wouldn't even have a reason to have similar speech patterns. They've only recently reunited and they haven't ever had a good relationship. And so I'm just like, you don't know anything about each other. You don't know how each other talks. You don't know anything about each other's lives. You're getting away with this simply because neither of you have friends in your lives. It had some elements of like an interesting conversation about, is being good or evil part of our DNA? And I think like some of the classic nature versus nurture conversations that happen around identical twins, just because you do have two people who share DNA and yet they exhibit differences, and so where do those differences come from is the question there. It's a little overdone. And my biggest gripe is that she uses a specific phrase. She'll say the character like flashes on something. I have never heard this phrase before. She's using it in this as a replacement for recalled or suddenly remembered or brought to mind. Like, but the phrase is she flashed on an idea or on a memory. It's wild to me. She uses it all the time. Every situation in which she could use some variation of that reminded me of, or that reminded her of, right? Or suddenly a memory pops into her head. No, she doesn't use any of those. It's always this person flashed on, fill in the blank. It was just a very weird phrasing to me. I asked my partner if he had ever heard someone use that, and his response was no. Like, that's such a weird way of saying it, as if it's like a light switch or like a flashlight in your brain that is just like going on and off based off of some trigger. Yeah, it was just weird to me. The writing itself was fine. Plot, like I said, was a little over-contrived. Ending was pretty predictable. So, like, it wasn't my favorite book. Was it interesting? Yes. And I did read this in, I don't know, a day and a half. So it was a very quick read. It was very engrossing, and I think it helps that the further you get, chapters get shorter because you more often change characters' POV, like the action really kicks up, and so it keeps you invested in the story and like wanting to find out what happens and get to the end. So it does a good job of making you finish and keeping you engaged, but I don't really have any interest in reading any more of this author's book, particularly in this series. So I think I ended up with like a 2.5 is what I would ideally rate it, but I rounded down to 2 stars on Goodreads. And that is Think Twice by Lisa Scottoline. And with that, my jibber jabber is done for now. I hope that you've enjoyed talking about books with me. If you have, don't forget to subscribe, and also leave a comment with like, what are you reading right now? Have you read any of the books I mentioned? Do you have any good recommendations for like cozy British mysteries? I'm also looking for any good recommendations for psychological thrillers and mysteries in general. It's a genres I'm trying to get into more, and would very much appreciate any of the ones that you all have read and loved and would recommend for me to read. With that, I'll see you on the next one.